Welcome back to Sunrise Daily, continuing our conversation on how the poverty index and the ease of doing business, how they all mix, because there are those who say that, look, how come that on that World Bank's ease of doing business index that was published in 2018, Nigeria seemed to have moved at 145th position out of 190 countries, and at the point we moved 24 places from 169, which we were in 2017. So does that mean that those notwithstanding, not as good as we ought to be?
Well, it's a good thing, but you see, when you're looking at the ease of doing business alone, ease of doing business is majorly carried out through regulations, right? But in 2017, the World Bank carried out a survey, an independent survey of multinational companies and their CEOs, that what do they really want before going into emerging economies? And the top and foremost on the list was political stability and security. Now, if you look at the poverty index, we're moving 8,000 people into extreme poverty every day. Now, when you move 8,000 people into extreme poverty every day, what is the offshoot? The first offshoot of poverty is insecurity. It's crime. Crime leads to insecurity, right? Now, when you now look at that, how it is going to affect your ease of doing business, we now went further into the research. What we discovered was very alarming. If you look at the global conflict tracker, you find that most of all the places you have conflicts in the world, right, are places you have extreme poverty. And then when you now move a step further into the global peace index, all the places you have extreme poverty in the world, and those countries that are on the global conflict tracker are at the bottom of the global peace index. And then, when you now move a step further again, go into TI ratings, that's a Transparency International, where you have the major poverty in the world, are at the bottom. All the countries are at the bottom of Transparency International. Why? Because, you see, poverty leads to corruption, and corruption further reinforces poverty. Then when you now, let me finish, when you go a step further again, go to the ease of doing business, you find that all the countries at the bottom the global peace index are at the bottom of the ease of doing business, including Nigeria. And what does that tell you? It tells you that, look, peace and stability is very, very key to the ease of doing business, to multinational companies coming to your country. And then what we now found out again was that if you look at data, between 2012 and 2015, when FDI started falling, reducing into the economy and companies moving their funds out, it was the height, that 2012 to 2015, it was at the height of Boko Haram. That tells you that these companies will not come into your country except that security stability is established.
Okay, let me quickly put this in before we go to the slide 2, which we'll talk about soon. You know, while you were talking about poverty and corruption at those at the lower end in that index, but how do we internalize or relate with the data that PACAC, that's the Presidential Advisory Council on Corruption, talked about when they had that conference on illicit financial flows? They said that in that, what they found that 30% of the funds that are proceeds, corrupt proceeds, are actually by politicians, you know, those who they refer to as politically exposed persons.
Yes.
But 70% of IFFs are from multinationals. These same people who are looking for stability to come into the country, they are the ones who are it. So these are those up there.
It makes sense. Why? Because, you see, when there's poverty, everybody starts to compromise. As I said, poverty breeds corruption.
But these multinationals,
yes,
they're not grappling with poverty.
No, what makes you think they are not grappling with poverty, but they are dealing with people who are grappling with poverty? Do you understand? For instance, I drove past the police college, right? And I looked at the buildings, and it hit me. You are telling these people to mount roadblocks, to mount checkpoints, and not to collect bribes. But go look at where they stay. It's not possible.
So do you understand? And institutions use it to change it.
Exactly. So even if the multinational companies, right, don't want to play ball or do not come into the economy to say they want to play ball in corruption, people will get them corrupt because of poverty.
Okay.
Let's go back to slide 2. You see, now, what is the explanation here? We are breeding poverty. There's nothing we do now that will reduce it. Why? Because our economic model is wrong. What we do is we run an expense economy. We are not investing in what brings wealth. It is your investment.
Was that before or even up till now?
Even till now, because if you look at the composition of the budget, right, it's 70-30. 70% recurrent, 30% capital. It is your investment that generates wealth, not your expense. And I'm going to prove this right now. Now, if you look at that, if you look at the slides, right, you see that in 1981, we had a GDP of 61.1 billion. By year 2000, it was 46.4 billion. But what happened between that same period? Population in poverty in 1981 was 35.6 million. Population in poverty in year 2000 was 79.5 million. We added 43.9 million to poverty in 19 years. Now, let them go to slide 3. This is justifiable, right? That we had a recession. Justifiable. Let them go to slide 3. You find out that, slide 3, please. Next slide. Good. Now, look at slide 3. From year 2000, GDP was 46.4 billion. By 2014, GDP had reached 568 billion, 568.5 billion. This was the PDP era. Everybody said we made progress, right? But what is progress? Progress is not just increasing GDP. Progress has to reflect in the lives of the people. How many people are you able to move out of poverty? This was why the Global Competitive Index was instituted. How many people do you have out of school? Infants do you have out of school? What is your mortality rate, right? Infant mortality rate. Those are the things that measure progress in an economy. That's why they put together the Global Competitiveness Index, right? Now, but look at this. Despite the fact that we had an increment of 522.1 billion in GDP between the same period, right? That means that the economy expanded by 1,125% during this period. But guess what? Population in poverty in year 2000 was 79.5 million. Population in poverty in 2014 was 123.5 million. How much did we add? We added 44 million people to poverty. Why? China recorded 2,665% growth. China moved about 800 million people out of poverty. Indonesia recorded growth. They moved people out of poverty. The Philippines recorded growth. They moved people out of poverty. Vietnam, India, all the Asian countries. But why are we increasing poverty while growth?
Even with the growth we're recording.
Sorry?
What's missing in this?
Good. The missing link is our investment. We are not investing.
Now, let me talk about that investment because that's where I wanted to. Because as at, I think the government, as at 13th of August this year, the federal government said that they had released 220 billion out of the 500 billion naira that's approved annually of a larger 1.5 trillion of the social intervention fund, of which it says 600,000 people have benefited. So that particular program, does that mean that it's not making any impact whatsoever?
Good question. Now, between year 2000 and 2004, poverty actually reduced in this country. Why? You remember PAP, right? In year 2000, percentage that were living in poverty in Nigeria was 65%. And total headcount was about 79.5. By year 2014,